Ooh, here we go. Okay. We are gonna watch another oversimplified video. Just gonna keep making our way through Oversimplified's video because they're so fun to react to. They cover a good amount of information pretty quickly. And typically they have been on topics that I can comment a decent bit about. So today we are gonna watch Hitler Oversimplified Part 1. Oh. Alright, it's only 6 minutes long, but it is part 1. I know a decent bit about his early life because I've taught 2 lessons maybe on him when I was a teacher assistant. So, yeah, I had to do some research on that. But I don't know him in depth. I know kind of like the basics. Served World War I. He had like an abusive father. His mother and brother died when he was young, and that's typically seen as part of the turning points in his life. Then World War I happened. He's almost killed by a British soldier, but the British soldier lets him go because, well, Hitler was unarmed or whatever. And then obviously, because it was World War I, towards the end of the war, no one really wanted to fight it anymore. So what else? He gets arrested in the early 20s. He gets famous by publishing a book while he's arrested. His jail time was, he lived in fairly comfortable conditions for a jail, especially for like someone who kinda, you could argue, was probably a domestic terrorist in a sense, because it was it was for the riots in some German city that the Nazis tried to take over in the 20s or something, and he was arrested for that. And yes, that'd be kind of domestic terrorism in a sense. Could be argued. Then the elections come around in 33. He wins with his party barely getting the necessary majority for him to become chancellor. And then, well, rest is history. Anyways, let's just go ahead and start watching.
Look at this baby. So gentle, so innocent. You'd think this child would grow up to become a good man, an honest man. Well, think again. Hitler was born Adolphus Hitler in 1889 in a small town.
Wait, what was...
Hitler
Got
was
it.
born Adolphus Hitler in
More like, do got it.
1889 in a small town in Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, was
wrecked
born out
Hitler
of
with that
wedlock,
joke.
but eventually changed his name to that of his stepfather, becoming Alois Hitler. Alois was a mid-level Austrian customs officer, not really rolling in cash, but certainly rolling in women. He married a rich, older lady, but then immediately started having affairs, including one with a much younger house servant. A few years later, he left his sick wife to be with his mistress, but since the Catholic Church didn't allow divorce at the time, he couldn't marry her. So he waited for his old wife to die and had a child in the meantime. Then his wife died, so he married his mistress and had another child, but then his new wife got sick, so he employed his much younger cousin Clara to take care of her. Then when his new wife died, he immediately got Clara, his cousin, pregnant, and then married her. In that order, you rock star. Clara and Alois had 3 children together, who all tragically died while in infancy. So when the 4th child, Adolf, came along, Clara spoiled him rotten. The Hitlers had 2 more kids, and the family moved around.
That's a lot of kids. That is a lot of kids. I mean, yeah, in this time, because this would be the late 1800s, pregnancies are still extremely risky. I mean, they're kind of still pretty risky even in first world countries to this day, because of the amount of stress the body has to go through. But for her to live through 4 childbirths, in which it was, no, 3, or was it 4? I already forget how many. 3 or 4 dying in infancy. And then she has another Adolf, and then 2 more. That's a lot to go through, man. I'm surprised she didn't die in childbirth, honestly.
A few times, meaning Adolf had to attend 5 different elementary schools. Adolf's father was strict.
Wait, what was that? What was that 101 school?
And the family moved around a few times, meaning Adolf had to attend 5 different
Society 101. Nationalism.
elementary schools.
Yeah.
Adolf's father was strict, quick to anger, and took most of it out on the eldest son until he had enough and ran away at the age of 14, leaving 7-year-old Adolf to do most of the chores and get berated by his father. The result was a difficult relationship with his dad, while he was super attached to his mother, who worried over him and his health excessively. Hitler did well in school at first. His grades were good and his teachers praised him. He was popular with the other kids and enjoyed gathering them together to play war games. He also loved reading and particularly
Simplified, why? White guys take over everything, yeah.
liked stories about cowboys and
Yeah.
Indians. As he grew older though, he started to get into trouble. He was caught smoking once, organized a raid on a local orchard, tormented his pro-Austria religion teacher with symbolic gestures, displaying his allegiance to the idea of united Germanic people under a greater German state in defiance of Habsburg Austria. You know, the usual. All of this
Yeah.
enraged Adolf's
I mean, who doesn't think like that, you know, right? Yeah.
father, who punished him severely. The area of Austria-Hungary that Hitler lived in was once part of the German Confederation, and many of the people who lived there considered themselves to be German. Adolf tended to just go against whatever his father said, and since his father was an Austrian public official, Hitler got big into German nationalism. This enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely. Around this time, a family tragedy struck. His 6-year-old brother, whom he loved a lot, died of measles when Adolf was 10, and was buried in the cemetery just across from their home. Around this time, neighbors reported a change.
I thought it was one of his older brothers, or well, his only older brother that died that affected him. I didn't know it was his younger brother.
In the young boy. Strange behaviors such as talking to trees and staying up late staring at the stars from
Hey man, if you don't talk to the trees, even love the earth? Come on.
the cemetery walls. He lost interest in religion and his school grades started to decline.
You're not
which
a
enraged
star.
his father, who punished him severely. It also didn't help that he had
Punished
just
him
entered
severely.
high school and the cool city boys treated him like a rural peasant. He had to repeat a grade and had little interest in most
Social Darwinism and why some people are just
school subjects,
No.
instead spending his time reading and drawing, which he was quite good at. One day his father said, "Son, someday you'll be a big balls public official like me." And Adolf replied, "No, father, I'm going to become an artist and soar high above the clouds with the eagles." This enraged his father, but by this time he was an old-ass man, so he just sort of let it go, and then died of a lung hemorrhage. Hitler just about passed his final semester and celebrated in the typical way, by getting blackout drunk and wiping his ass with the certificate.
I mean, come on, that's what you always do, right? Right? That's what everyone else does, right?
However, he didn't take the overall final school exam.
Oh boy, social Darwinism and nationalism are great and all, but just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting you commit genocide or anything. Let's hope no one who will be of major historical significance is absent for this particular lesson. By the way, has anyone seen Ace?
Instead just dropping out. The now 16-year-old boy was unemployed without much
Gotcha.
purpose in life, and for the next 3 years he stayed that way. He spent most of his time
I mean, I feel like most college students, or well, college age students, college age by the modern sense, are lost in life for many years following high school graduation.
at the opera with his only friend, August Kubizek. Kubizek later wrote his memories of the young Hitler and said he was passionately interested in many things, felt he was in many ways better than others his age, was quick to anger just like his father, and an incredible speaker once he was ranting. When he was 18, he said a very sad goodbye to his mother and went to Vienna to take the entrance exam for art school. He failed. Soon after, he had to return home. His mother was sick and her health was rapidly deteriorating. Hitler's
By the way, I think, correct me if I am wrong, but I believe one of the reasons why Hitler did not pass the entrance exam or whatever to the Vienna art school is because his paintings, while they are, honestly, from my opinion, his painting skills are actually pretty good, right? He could draw. His drawings were of the realistic design. They weren't like impressionist or anything, like, which was what was gaining popularity in this time period, the early 1900s, which is where we are at now, I believe. I think he was denied entrance because his paintings were of the realistic side, and the art school wanted to promote, I guess, new styles, unique things, and Hitler's style was just more of the same old, so like in that sense it kind of makes sense as to why he was denied. He wasn't denied because of his lack of skill. It's just probably lack of originality, because his was more he drew on things that he could see, like he would draw a building or whatever, right? Like photo kind of photorealism, but they were more of the typical paintings you see in history textbooks of like 1800s cities, right? That was kind of what he drew.
Stayed by her side, and when she eventually died, the family doctor said he had never seen someone so overwhelmed with grief as Hitler was. Then Hitler returned to Vienna,
Which, by the way, I think that was one of his paintings, wasn't it?
still hoping to find a career in the arts,
Or was
but
it
he
not?
never
I
did.
can't remember.
Instead, without parental support, Hitler ended up on the streets. Now in his early 20s, he spent a few rough years living in and out of homeless shelters, making what little he could from selling postcards he painted. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when and how Hitler's extreme ideological beliefs formed, but his time in Vienna would have certainly played a role. Anti-Semitism was widespread in the city. The mayor, whom Hitler supported, was an outspoken anti-Semite. There were many right-wing anti-Semitic newsletters, which Hitler took a keen interest in. He bought into the conspiracy theories and became a firm believer in the idea that there are many races in constant struggle with one another, the purest of which were the German Aryan people, and the worst of which he believed.
Even though the actual original term for Aryan derives from the Indo-Iranian peoples that lived a long time ago, are the modern day Indian Iranian. I don't know. I'm not sure. I just know that Aryan is supposed to be I think Indo-Iranian. I think is the proper name. So yeah, it's not white people. It's not white people.
Believed were Jews. Since Austria-Hungary was a multi-ethnic empire full of lesser races, Hitler wasn't a fan. So when he was 24, he moved to Munich in Germany to avoid doing military service, and for one more year he was a drifter on the streets, until something huge happened. In 1914, long-standing tensions in Europe erupted into the First World War. Crowds across Europe celebrated the news. Within days,
Yes. I feel like this gets talked about a bit, kind of online, I think, more than it does in classrooms. I've tried to, when I have talked about topics like this, especially when talking about World War II, I talk about, it's been a while since I've given a lesson on this because I'm not taking any teaching classes right now. I'm not a TA right now. When I would teach a lesson on World War II, what I would enunciate is World War I was a war when it started. People were all behind it. They wanted a war when it started. World War II, on the other hand, is a war that no one wanted. No one. Because they still had the experiences of World War I fresh in their minds. Also, they had the worldwide. There was a pandemic that went around in the early 20s and late 1910s, the Spanish flu, which killed roughly 55 to 80 million people, I believe, and infected 500 million people are believed to have gotten the flu. And then a decade later, they go into a Great Depression. No one wants a war after experiencing all that within the time span of about 20 years. So, World War I, on the other hand, there's been buildup of tension and tension. There's rampant nationality, people going on, believing in their nation states. So World War I, yes, was greeted by people cheering in the streets. They were happy that they were at war. They were going to make their country proud or whatever. Then, World War II is the complete opposite.
Hitler volunteered.
But also, they also end. Those wars have different end tones. Obviously, when we look at it in the modern day, we don't really see that as much, especially with World War II. We don't really see it because, we then get into the Cold War. But World War I ends with starts with cheers, but ends with people being sad and scared. World War II starts with people not happy, with scared and frightened. World War II ends with people happy, believing that they have defeated the world's greatest evil. The general populace, of course, thinking that the world's greatest evil has been defeated, right? So those are just a little interesting fact I'd like to throw out.
For the German army. The war gave him a purpose in life. His fellow soldiers gave him friendship and brotherhood. Despite the horrors of war, Hitler considered it to be the best time of his life. He was reportedly a brave soldier and was awarded the Iron Cross, first class. He was also very lucky and had many close encounters with death. His luck ran out in 1916, however, when an artillery shell injured his leg. He went back to Germany to recover and was outraged to find a general apathetic anti-war attitude among the exhausted and hungry German populace. With the war turning against Germany, he returned to the front lines, but was temporarily blinded by a British gas attack in 1918. A month later, still recovering in hospital, Hitler learned of Germany's defeat and surrender. The terms of the peace treaty were tough on Germany. It had to pay a lot of money and lose a lot of soldiers. These conditions weakened Germany and humiliated the German people. Europe's borders changed after the war too. New countries were formed out of Russia's lost territory, Austria-Hungary was dissolved, and there was one big new country splitting Germany into two. Hitler, seeing the country he loved humiliated like this, said that hatred grew in him for those responsible, by which he meant communists and Jews, who he believed had stabbed Germany in the back by spreading
dissent and anti-war propaganda. You know, it's also kind of weird, though, that he would blame communists, because it was kind of the communists that got Russia out of the war in the first place. It was communists that allowed Germany to then focus on one front. So really, it's kind of, you know, those darn democracies' fault.
Spreading dissent and anti-war propaganda back home.
Great video. That's essentially really kind of all you need to know about Hitler. Well, actually, I don't really think you need to know much about Hitler because he was just a deranged lunatic. I mean, it adds to the overall understanding of World War II if you look at the individuals and learn their stories. But for someone that's a deranged genocidal maniac, I don't think you really need to try and understand them or anything, or try and look at their past and see how they progressed to it. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter, because there are people that live with horrible pasts that are quite similar to Hitler's. If not, there are circumstances in which they had a worse upbringing than Hitler, and they don't turn into genocidal maniacs. Right? So, So it's not a necessity, but it's interesting to learn about someone who is so historically important, such a huge figure in the events of the world, and in the events of world history, right? But that's where we're going to end it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thank you.